Good morning, and as we come to the final part of this talk by Rob, I don't want to spend too much time yabbering away now because it's quite a chunky bit to get to the end. So before we dive into this final part, as he pulls it all together, let's start by saying the Jesus Creed out loud. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There are no commands greater than these. Right, here is Rob. Let's watch together.
Now, I want to give you an image, I want to give you a truth, and I want to give you a question to sort of practically put some legs on this. So first, an image. For thousands of years, human beings have built temples. Mosques, tabernacles, sheds, teepees, temples, spaces, sacred spaces. And the reason why they have done that is out of an intuitive awareness that all things are in some way connected to all other things and that things don't exist in isolation. What reductionist materialism says to you essentially is the meaning that you have, you just made that up. It just exists in isolation. What the great traditions have said for thousands of years is that, in the Jewish tradition, the Lord is one. That experience of joy you had is some sort of echo of a larger sound. This makes sense. Your story is part of a larger story. Your students, many of them, have been marinated in a world that at a very subtle level taught them nothing is actually ultimately related to everything else. But for thousands of years, human beings have had this intuitive awareness that there is a oneness to things. And so in building a temple, the power of building a temple is it helps people conceive of that which is holy and sacred. So you build a temple, you have a religious gathering, you have a faith community that has a physical space where it meets as a way of helping people conceive of that which is sacred and holy, that which is connected to the larger thing. Now, this is absolutely important, but it helps people understand the idea of something that is holy and sacred and belonging to something bigger than itself. But the problem, if the temple stays up, is what can begin to happen in people's minds is they begin to believe that some space is sacred and holy and other space isn't. So you have to build a temple in order to understand this, but then you got to tear that mother down. Does that make sense? So what you see with Jesus is Jesus say, no, you don't understand. The divine isn't confined to a box all the way back to the ark. This is the fundamental tension all the way through the scriptures, which is the divine confined to space, time, a box, or a statue? Is the holy and sacred, which is why Moses is told by the divine has no boundaries or edges. Brand new idea in human history. That which cannot be confined in actual space and time. So what you find right away are things like the psalmist saying, the earth, Psalm 24, is the Lord's and everything in it. What's the psalmist saying? Come on now. What the psalmist is saying is the whole thing is a temple. The whole thing is a temple. Your job is to teach your kids that the whole thing is a temple. The physics lab, the coding center, the coding nerds. There, I got it, coding nerds. The whole thing is a temple. Because a lot of people, when they get a paycheck from the temple, get confused and think their job is to keep the temple propped up. I don't know, is that Christian music? Oh, does it suck? Probably. You see what that is? Does it exist in the temple? Well, wait. Whole thing is a temple. The whole thing is a temple. And if you're a Christian, the Christian tradition takes this way farther. Because what is Eucharist? This bread and wine is holy because all bread and wine is holy. We do not come in out of the big bad world to meet with God. We gather to take the bread and wine to remind us that the Christ is in the common and the divine is in all of life. You're not trying to teach your kids to come to a place where they meet God. You're trying to create a space where their eyes are opened and their senses are heightened to the divine, sacred, holy nature of all of life. You're a scientist, you want to study history, you want to study biology, you want to code computers, you want to be a public school teacher, you want to be an artist, you want to start businesses and make lots of money. Awesome, the whole thing is a temple. Go, 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 enjoy it. This is your sacred gift to the world. That kid needs to know from day one there is no division here, because the division has killed everybody and it doesn't even exist. And now you have quantum physicists saying, actually everything's made of atoms and atoms are made of particles and particles are relationships of energy. Time magazine, Jeffrey Kruger, 3 years ago, the Higgs boson discovery is spiritual. Actually, by the way, here's how I picture it. For a generation, people have understood this weird thing that somehow science and faith aren't the dance partners they've always been. And what they've pictured almost is like science going this way and faith going this way. But if you and I face each other and then we turn and walk away from each other because we aren't together, and we walk long enough, we will go around the world and we will walk into each other. So I think what's actually happening right now is they've been pushed so far apart that they just did that, and they just kept going, and they walked around the earth, and now they're walking up to each other again. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening. So anybody who's like, oh, well, how can you be faith and science? How out of the game are you that you're actually living with those old nasty categories? Are you kidding me? Come on. The whole thing's a temple. The whole thing's a temple. The whole thing's whatever they discover next, awesome. The greatest theologians and the greatest scientists are all saying the exact same thing, which is, and I'm going to get technical here, whoa. Literally, Lisa Randall knocking on heaven's door, her new book about dinosaurs and physics, and considered by many like one of the greatest living scientists. I saw her there tonight in Santa Monica, and literally half the questions, she had these brilliant answers about gravitational force and quantum physics, and then she would say, at some point it got to be so beautiful because it was almost like a liturgy. She would give this technical, brilliant answer, and then she would say, beyond that, we don't really know. It was so beautiful. It was so fantastic. It was so yes, all of it. The whole thing is a temple. And then people will use this phrase, which I love. I don't know, I'm just into God's truth. What like there's some other kind? See, these categories are so ridiculous. True, period. Is it true? Fantastic. Which leads from an image to a truth. In the first century Corinthian church, you have this fascinating thing, and hang with me here, this will be a little weird, but just hang with me and try to imagine. There were different Christian leaders, and people followed the different leaders and didn't follow the others, and there were like rivalries between the different groups of followers. I know. Makes you believe in original sin, you know what I'm saying? Or, as my most influential preaching mentor, Ezzy Izzard, says, original sin, like, I poked my eye out with a badger. Oh, good, that's original. Now, what's fascinating is the Apostle Paul charges into the situation with a letter, like you do. And he's like, basically, you knuckleheads, original Greek. Some of you say you follow Peter. Some of you say you follow Paul. Some of you say you follow Paul. What? Basically, he says to them, if it's true, it's yours. So he sort of confronts this weird sort of rivalry they have with, wait, why wouldn't you open yourself up to the truth from whoever it comes? Fair game, well played. But then he continues. It's a run-on sentence, not his first. He does not stop there, though. Whether it's of Peter, Apollos, Cephas, or the world, or life, or death. What does he say? Or the present, or the future. So he starts with the scope of a few rivalries among teachers. But then just for fun, because he's just going to Apple Rainbow Death Wheel them. You know what I mean? Like this is going to make your frame freeze up. Oh, all things are yours. If Paul says it, it's yours, and it's beautiful. If Apollo says it, it's yours. Oh, and if Peter says it, it's yours. Okay, got it. Oh, and the world, which I think is a slightly more expansive category. Would you agree? There's a little leap between the third and the fourth thing in his list. Would you agree? It's like Paul, Apollo, Cephas, oh, the world. And then if you're like, oh, okay, the world, got it. Fairly wider category. Oh, life. Bit wider. Death, pretty much think we got it covered there. What does he say? Present, future? It's almost, he's like, things unseen. Oh, and by the way, all the stuff that I haven't included, I'm including. You know what I mean? And what does he say? All things are yours. All things are yours. And you're of the Christ consciousness, the energy that animates all things. What does he say in Colossians? He holds all things together. So when he speaks of Jesus, he does not speak of a solution to a problem that was inserted late in the game. It wasn't like God was like, oh man, they're naked and running around. What am I going to do? You need a job. Go down there. This is actually the thing that the New Testament writers seem to be addressing most clearly and bluntly, which is the Christ is not a solution to a problem kicked up at the last minute. Through him all things were made. He holds all things together. There is an energy that surges through all of creation. The cross is not something new. It is the revelation of that which has been true all along. Jesus isn't cooked up at the last minute. Jesus the Christ isn't Jesus the last name. It's Jesus, the revelation of the divine energy surging through all of creation from the very beginning. So when your students stumble across something and think, this is life, what does that have to do with Jesus? Other than everything, you're back in the temple. Your job is to tear the temple down. Your job is to tear. Do you have anybody who comes every time there's a church meeting and there's something within you that's like, oh, that's great, they're really committed, but now you're 7 years in, and you're like, I don't think they're getting it. Anybody know what I'm talking about? They're actually too into this thing. I actually wonder if they're here because they don't have a life. Can we be honest about this? Can we just be honest about this? They're really, really into this. I don't think they need another church service. I think they need a cause in the world with real people to give themselves to, and they keep coming to church and singing songs about Jesus as a way to avoid the very real responsibility they've been given by the Jesus who says, you will do greater things than me. Are we preaching yet? The temple can become a place where people hide out from the very real calling we have to do something with this world. And so your job is in some strange way to build it and create it and to name the space and to frame it and let it be what it is, and so that they have a place to gather, to have senses heightened, but then you also at the same moment in some strange way are tearing it down. Yeah, now we're talking. You're both building it and subverting it at the same time. This is why how often what you're really saying in a lot of those sermons is you're saying, I'm so glad that we've gathered here, but this isn't the point. Anybody know what I'm talking about? But obviously, when the paycheck is tied into that, it's easy to be like, we're so glad you're gathered, this isn't the point, but we're so glad you're gathered, please come back. Because I'd love to send my kids to college. Yeah, it's just like politics, follow the money. You're building the temple and you're tearing it down. Because you want these kids to understand that the whole thing is a temple. You want to study literature, you want to study comparative religions, you want to go drill wells, you want to stand up, you want to organize for Bernie, you go do it. Because the whole thing is a temple and all things are yours. Now that's a tattoo. You get barbed wire, all things are yours. Do something with some balls, you know what I'm saying? What in the world? All things are yours. I think Paul knew exactly what he's doing. It's like you have this little petty, weird rivalry about who's right and who's wrong. Claim don't just affirm it, claim it. He's not just saying every new quantum physics discovery, go, wow, that's pretty cool. Don't just affirm it, claim it and own it, because you are of Christ and Christ is of God. Celebrate it, lead the celebration. No way. I was at a party and I was introduced to the man who's in charge of everything that we put in space at JPL, like one of the most famous scientists in the world. And my friend was so excited for the two of us to meet because he was like, oh, this is going to be so much fun. And the first thing he says to me, I'm in my 70s. He says, I've been doing this a long time. And he says, we are going to find life on other planets. Not in my lifetime, but in yours. He says to Kristen and I. That's like one of his opening lines. Because I'm like, this is one of like the greatest living scientists. If I said his name, you'd be like, whoa. And that's like one of his opening lines, is like total woo-woo stuff, which suddenly I'm like, really? Cool. And he says, and when we do, you're a pastor, it's going to completely destroy your whole story. Because God's sending Jesus to save people. What if there's other planets? And I said, oh, no, you've completely mistaken. For me, it'll just make the story even better. It'll just make the story even better. If your faith is going to crumble if they find life on other planets, then just get a new one now. And if your faith is in trouble because the earth is older than 6,000 years, get a new one now. Just quickly, like literally, go out to the car in the glove compartment, take it out, put it on, wear the shirt, and if your students aren't handed a joyous, limber, open, celebratory understanding of this beautiful, strange, mysterious, exotic world, they're in trouble. They're in trouble. You're building a temple, you're tearing it down, all things are yours. One last thought. Friend of mine, a comedian, brilliant comedian, travels all over, is as funny as they get. He recently, and doesn't come anywhere near a church, and he's over at our house all the time. He's just like a brother to me. He recently interacted with a Christian pastor. Are you familiar with Christian pastors? And he says, I just had this interaction. I was traveling and I interacted with this Christian pastor. And he's like, I started asking him questions, and he said, it was so weird because he kept talking about, basically I just kept asking him more refined questions. I was trying to get at, like, what are you doing? Like, what's the thing that drives you? Because my friend is really like, because a comedian goes for the chum in the water. Like, why do you do what you do? Why is that offensive? Why don't you say certain things? Why don't you, there's like a radar for that which no one wants to talk about. So he just does it in real life. Like, you'll say something like, yeah, that was kind of weird. And he'll be like, why? Because he's looking for material. But he's also, like, there's this radar. As soon as everything gets polite, he's like, oh, no way, I'm not doing the formal polite thing. I'm going to find out why everybody all of a sudden stiffened up. And he says, the pastor, he's like, I just kept asking him questions, and eventually he was like, well, because we got to get people in. We got to get people in the building. We got to get them converted. We got to get them part of the church. And my friend was like, obviously, like, but you get paid when they come in. So it seems like there's a couple things going on there. And he's like, yeah, but, and my friend says to me, after a while, I realized it's like he's playing with scared money. He's like, it's like he's playing with scared money. Oh, are you playing with scared money? Is your community playing with scared money? Ooh. They're reading that. Ooh. The moment your kid starts finding out about some idea or some new expression, or they go do that, the moment you tense up, the moment you become, you have just taught that kid something about the thing that you represent, which is, we don't quite know what to do with that. Instead of, yeah, keep going. What else did you learn? What else did you find? Yeah, that I actually don't do that for those reasons. Yeah, that actually, in my experience, is quite just. You can be as honest as possible, but they'll probably be much more interested in your opinion if at the outset you are like, yeah, what's in that? Is there anything good in that? Oh, there isn't? Okay, interesting. They're probably much more interested in your very straightforward, I never take part in X, because all I've ever done and seen is it brings destruction. They're probably much more interested in your very clear denials and warnings of things when they understand that your spirit is, all things are ours. Are you playing with scared money? Are you playing with scared money? When it comes to science, are you playing with scared money? Because all things are yours, and you are of Christ, and Christ is of God. Your job is to tear temples down, because all things are yours. You don't need to play with scared money. You don't need to play with scared money. Come on. Come on. Who will stand with kids in the sacred spaces of loss, joy, euphoria, suffering, death, cancer, cutting, despair, celebration, music, good food? Who will create those sacred spaces? Because we need them more than ever. The thing that you do, the world needs more than ever. And some of you are actually paid to do this, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to do. What? You get paid to do this? Are you kidding me? How fantastic is that? What in the world? Come on. I have no idea what time it is. I have no idea how much. Oh, yeah? Okay, can I do one more thing? Let me finish with one story. 1 minute. And then we're really done. Then we're done for my whole thing. Okay. Okay, so a couple of years ago, I wrote a book called Love Wins, which was unique in the history of publishing because everybody who read it really liked it. And so I did all this media. And I was on in New York back and forth and I was doing Good Morning America, and they said, we're so glad that you're on today because the other guest is Sammy Hagar, who can't drive 55. And you all know Sammy Hagar, right? Okay, good. And they were like, this is so great. So he comes in and we're hanging out, and a surreal life became slightly surrealer, if that's a word. And they said, we're so glad that we have you and Sammy, would you guys do a photo shoot together? Because at Good Morning America, we love moments like this. And I'm loving moments like this, and I'm loving the fact that my wife and his wife are chatting. It's all just like, if you ever have a moment when you're like, if you would have shown me this video clip from this period of my life, I would have been like, no way. So they take us on the set, and he and I do these photos together. And then everybody leaves. They go back to the green room. They go over to the other set because they're coming out of a commercial. And he and I are sitting side by side, and he leans over, he's like, so man, like, what do you do? And I had one of those, like, I'm sitting with Sammy Hagar, and he just asked me what I do. And I was like, well, this is fascinating. So I said, well, I believe we're all in this together, and there's good news. Like there's an empty tomb. Like we're going to be okay. And what I get to do with my work is I get to go around and create space. I get to create space where people can be human. And they can find out that all the stuff they have jammed down in there, it's okay. Because I believe there's something that's moving in the dark and the light, in the good and the bad. So I get to create these spaces where people can be free to be fully human. And they can find out that all that stuff in darkness, there might even be something new happening there. And I get to go around and do that and announce good news. And he listens and he goes, man, you could change the world with that shit. So, my brothers and sisters of Progressive Youth Ministry, may grace and peace be with you, and may you change the world with that shit.
So, what a fascinating talk. As a youth pastor listening to that a number of years ago, it rattled me because what you were saying is so powerful. But here we are, 21st century, and if you've been journeying with us over the last number of months, you'll understand that we totally believe that everything is a temple. That unlike many people in the world, especially in the West, who think we're living in the waiting of the second temple Judaism, which is at the heart of much of evangelical politics, we believe that when God created this world, his Mishkan, it is his dwelling place. And at the moment he is rebuilding it, all of it, back into the temple that he created before evil entered the world. And you and I are a part of that. We get to create sacred space. It's incredible to think that when Rob gave that talk, which wasn't too long after he wrote his book Love Wins, which was massively controversial, and many people said Rob was going to hell, even though they said he didn't really believe in hell the way we believe in it, so he was definitely going to hell. And that talk, which today we would go, it makes perfectly sense, was again very controversial, because the heart of it is understanding that this world and its heart is good. That God created this world, and when he created it and when he said it is good, what he actually meant was that it is good. And that you and I are part of this incredibly good world. Yes, evil has entered into it. Yes, we experience the workings of that evil. We see how evil works through sin and suffering, direct and indirect. We look at the world we're at now in the 21st century, in the middle of this pandemic, and we realize how evil is at work. But in essence, and at the heart, this world is good. And the point of Jesus, which what Rob was trying to get at, is quite simple really. That Jesus came to redeem and restore. That he came to redeem us, redeem the world, and to restore it back to its former glory, if you would like. And you and I are a part of exactly that. And we get to carry good news. We get to create sacred space where people can sit with the questions that they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to go any further because this last part was extremely long, as you heard. But as you go about your day-to-day, whatever you're doing, whether you think it is deeply spiritual, like a pastor's job supposedly would be, or if you think your job cannot be more further away from what a deeply spiritual job is, just remember, the whole thing is a temple, and you and I get to play in it. Let's pray together. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not down the road of temptation, but deliver us from evil. For the kingdom, power, and glory are yours, now and forever. Amen. God bless you as you get to play in his temple today.